What's up, y'all? My name is Mr. Canada, and welcome to my math domain. In this video, we're going to be talking about how we can write a linear equation in slope-intercept form when the y-intercept is not given to us. We're going to look into what steps we have to take in order to write an equation in y equals mx plus b. So let's go ahead and get started. So just like the video entails, we want to look into what kind of work we have to do in case the y-intercept is not given to us. Remember that if you want to write an equation in slope-intercept form, you need to find the slope and you also need to find the y-intercept. So when one of those numbers is taken out of the problem, we have to go ahead and figure out a plan B. No pun intended. So one thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you want to look for or want to start working towards finding the b value, keep this in mind. What we're going to be still doing is that we're still going to be finding the slope first. Then we're going to be using that slope in order to plug it in to y equals mx plus b alongside an x and y point from the table. And this point can be any point that you want. And then our hope is that once we fill in the missing pieces, all we have to do is solve for the b value. Now that's a lot of talking and sounds like a lot of words, and it probably sounds a lot harder than it seems. But once you actually see how the work looks like in action, you're going to feel like it's not so bad. But regardless, practice is going to make perfect. So let's look into our first example. Our first example is the following. We have a table, x and y. We have the points 2, 5, 4, 10, 6, 15, and 8, 20. So what kind of things do we have to do in order to start writing our equation in y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form? Well, first things first is that we need the slope. The slope is going to be the key to everything. So that's going to be our first step, is that we want to calculate slope. So let's go ahead and kind of figure that out first. So one thing that I like to do whenever I'm calculating the slope is that I like to label what my x1 and what my y1 is, and what my x2 is and what my y2 is. Because when I plug stuff into the slope formula, I'll know exactly what numbers I'm working with and exactly where they're going to be headed towards. So for example, y2 is going to be 10, so 10 minus y1 is going to be 5, divided by x2 is going to be 4, minus x1 is going to be 2. By doing this, we have 10 minus 5 is going to be 5. 4 minus 2 is going to be 2. Now, let's go ahead and simplify this. So let's see if it can be simplified. So 5 divided by 2 is going to be 2.5. Now, I recommend that you always try to keep your slope as a fraction. So if we convert 2.5 into a fraction, hey, guess what? It's going to be 5 over 2 again. So that's going to be the first piece of information for ourselves. Now, if you like to prefer to keep your answer, your slope, as a decimal, that's totally fine. But I really do recommend that if you have a repeating decimal, that you just keep it as a fraction. Like if you have 0.3 repeating, it's better if you change that into a fraction because it will affect your calculation. So either way, 5 over 2 or 2.5, the choice is yours. But our slope is going to be the same regardless, 5 over 2. So that's step one. Step two is going to rely on us on picking a point from the table that we're going to be using to work with. Now, like I said, this can be any point from the table. You can choose 2, 5, you can choose 4, 10, 6, 15, or 8, 20. My suggestion is choose a point that looks like it's going to require the least amount of work. So in this case, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go ahead and choose 2, 5 because the numbers are smaller. So now that we've actually chosen 2, 5, what do we do with that? Here's what we're going to do. We are going to solve for b. And here's how we're going to do it. What we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and start off by writing down what we know. We know that the slope is 5 over 2. And we know that our x is going to be 2. And that our y is going to be 5. From here, what we're going to do is plug in everything that we know into y equals mx plus b. So that means that y is going to be 5 equals, our m is going to be 5 over 2 times our x, we're going to go ahead and plug in a 2. Notice that I'm putting parentheses here because we're going to end up multiplying these two numbers. And then since we don't know anything about b, the y-intercept, we're just going to leave it as b. Our whole goal from this point forward is that we want to solve this equation for the letter b, which means that we have to simplify and keep and isolate the b value, keep it completely by itself. So check this out. The first thing we're going to do is that we are going to multiply 5 over 2 and positive 2. So let's go ahead and let our calculator do the work there. So 5 divided by 2 times 2. And that gets us 5. So that means that we have 5 is equal to, this got us a value of 5 plus b. Okay, so what's the next step? Well, like I said, we're trying to keep b by itself. So in order to do that, we have to get rid of this plus 5. The question is how? Well, we do an inverse operation. Subtract 5 on both sides. And by doing so, this cancels each other out, but the 5s also cancel each other out on the other side. So we have 0 on one side, and then we have b on the other, which means that b has to be equal to 0. So guess what? Now we have the last piece of this puzzle. The b is going to be equal to 0. So the question is how is this information here? How is the m and how is this b going to help us out? Well, here's how it's going to help us out. Now that we know what m is, now that we know what b is, we can write our equation. So y is equal to mx plus b. Our m is going to be 5 over 2. So 5 over 2x plus our b is going to be 0. But one thing to keep in mind is that 0 doesn't add any value. So technically, our equation is going to be y is equal to 5 over 2x plus nothing. This looks like a lot of work, but keep these steps in mind. Step 1 is that you're going to look for the slope. Step 2 is that you want to pick a point from the table and then kind of write down the information that you do know. In this case, by step 2, you should hopefully know what the slope is, and you should know what x and y is based on what point you chose. Then what we're doing is we're copying down y equals mx plus b, and we're plugging in the information that we chose and that we know of. And hopefully, 3 out of the 4 spots will be filled in, which is what we're shooting for. And then we just kind of simplify. Multiply these two parts, and then in this case, we subtracted them. Sometimes you might have to add, so pay attention to the sign. And then once we have our b value, then we solve the puzzle. We put it all together. Y is equal to mx, which is our slope from step 1, plus whatever our b value was from step 2. Let's go ahead and look at one more example, but this time not from a table, but from 2 points, which more or less is the same thing. So look at this example right here. We have the points 1, 5 and 4, 11. Let's write an equation in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, that fits these 2 points. So let's recall our steps here. Step 1 is that we want to look for the slope. Calculate slope. Slope is the key to everything here. And that's true for a lot of things in linear functions. So m is equal to, well, I think it would be a good idea again to label the points that you're working with. x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, so y2 is going to be 11 minus y1 is going to be 5 divided by x2 is going to be 4 minus x1 is going to be 5. Or sorry, x1 is going to be 1. So let's simplify. 11 minus 5 is 6. 4 minus 1 is 3. 6 divided by 3 is going to get us 2. So that means that our slope is going to be equal to the number 2. So that's step 1. We calculated the slope. Step 2 is that we want to solve for b. Now, part of this is that you have to choose a point, x and y, from the points that are given to us. So in this case, you can either choose 1 and 5, or you can choose 4 and 11. I'm just going to go ahead and choose 1 and 5 because the numbers are smaller. So let's kind of identify what we know. M, we said it was 2. Our x, according to the numbers we're going to work with, is 1. And our y, according to the numbers we're working with, is 5. So here's the question. Can I choose x1 and let's say, for example, this y2? No. You have to choose a whole coordinate point. It has to stay together. It's either 1 and 5 or 4 and 11. So now that we have these numbers, this is our next step. We're going to plug everything in to y equals mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b. Our y is going to be 5 equals to, our slope is going to be 2, parentheses, because we're going to end up multiplying. Our x is going to be 1, and then we don't know anything about b. That's the whole point. So then 2 times 1 is going to be 2 plus b, and then we subtract 2 on both sides. What's going to happen is that this cancels out, and here we have 5 minus 2, which is going to get us a value of 3. So that means 3 is equal to b. So we know what the b value is now. B is completely by itself, so that means b is equal to the number 3. Again, what should we do with this information? Well, now that we know what m is, and now that we just worked for b, now we can write our equation. So y is equal to mx plus b. One thing to keep in mind is that we are not plugging in x and y again. We're keeping those blank because now we are in the equation phase. So mx, well, my m is 2, so this is going to be 2x. Plus, my b value here is 3, so I'm going to go ahead and put plus 3. If my b value is negative, I would put minus 3. So this is our linear equation in slope-intercept form that fits those 2 points. Again, look at the steps that we're doing here. We're calculating slope. We're picking a number. We're picking a coordinate point more specifically that we want to work with, and we're writing it down. So we're keeping track of the information that we're using. We write y equals mx plus b, and we plug in everything that we know. We know m, we know x, and we know y. The whole point is that b should be the only thing that's missing, and we're going to solve for it. We multiply 2 and 1, we get 2, subtract 2, b is equal to 3. Now that we know m, now that we know b, we write our equation using those numbers. And we don't plug in x and y again because now we are writing our equation. Well, I hope you guys learned something new today. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I'll get to you as soon as I can. If you liked the video, and subscribe to my channel for more Algebra 1 videos. And as always, please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.